In part 1 of this analysis, we saw that committing hatred, violence, or terrorism are in direct violation of the Quranic verses that were falsely accused by the movie Fitna. We also saw that to misinterpret these verses, whether by a Muslim or a non-Muslim, requires a combination of false translations, omissions, and fabricated context. Even the Dutch Prime Minister rejected Fitna. He said, "The film equates Islam with violence. We reject this interpretation. The vast majority of Muslims reject extremism and violence. In fact, the victims are often also Muslims." But the question remains, why do many Muslims display anti-Western sentiments and others even resort to violence? This video will identify who is actually to blame for the spread of extremism and violence. Furthermore, we will see what the Quran has to say about these issues. In terms of inciting prejudice and oppression, both the US and Israeli governments practice religious and ethnic profiling. First, the US Supreme Court endorsed racial profiling in times of national emergency to justify the involuntary internment of 110,000 Japanese Americans on the sole basis of ethnicity and national origin during World War II. Second, the US detained 1,200 Arab and Muslim immigrants after 9/11. Human Rights Watch points out that the US government contradicted its anti-prejudice message by directing its anti-terrorism efforts at Arabs and Muslims, which included secret immigration detention and FBI interviews of thousands of non-citizens. Third, Israeli military regulations permit detention of Palestinians for 18 days without cause, interrogation for another 180 days, and indefinite detainment without charges or a trial under administrative detention. Since the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories in 1967, about 650,000 Palestinians have been detained, 15% of the population, with over 11,000 still in Israeli jails without due process. Fourth, the previous US government and its allies were also responsible for the torture of Muslims in Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, Israeli and other prisons. In contrast, the Quran ordains kindness and justice.
Lo, Allah enjoineth justice and kindness.
There is absolutely no exception towards any peaceful member of other religions.
Allah forbiddeth you not those who warred not against you on account of religion, and drove you not out from your homes, that ye should show them kindness, and deal justly with them.
Furthermore, just treatment is required even in the presence of hatred towards any people.
Be steadfast witnesses for Allah in equity, and let not hatred of any people seduce you, that ye deal not justly.
Therefore, while numerous Western governments carry out wide-scale racial profiling and abuse of their own declared civil rights, Islam requires just treatment of all people regardless of race or religion. Allah, Allah, Allah. In terms of terrorism against civilians, several Western governments commit violence against civilians as a military strategy. The definition of terrorism is the use of violence against civilians to instill fear, which is strikingly identical to the barbaric US government's shock and awe doctrine, compiled by Ullman and Wade, which aims to achieve strategic shock and awe on the opposing forces, their leadership, and populace. Targets in each category include military, civilian, industrial, infrastructure, and societal. The objective is to apply brutal levels of power and force. The ability to shock and awe ultimately rests in the ability to frighten, scare, intimidate, and disarm. This strategy includes non-military targets which indiscriminately result in civilian casualties. The doctrine also cites terrifying examples of purely civilian targets, such as the firebombing of Tokyo City. 140,000 civilians were killed and another million injured. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with 340,000 total deaths. B-52 raids in Vietnam. 2 million Vietnamese civilians were killed from each side during that war.
I got numerous individuals on the road. You want me to take those out? Take them out.
In Afghanistan, nearly 5,000 Afghani civilians were killed in the first 2 months of airstrikes. In Iraq, more than 100,000 civilians were killed as collateral damage since the start of that war in 2003. Israel also uses these tactics in southern Lebanon and Gaza, which has led to utter civilian devastation. In contrast, Islam strictly prohibits violence against civilians. The Quran unequivocally prohibits killing any innocent person.
Whosoever killeth a human being for other than manslaughter or corruption in the earth, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind.
The Quran also protects enemy combatants who offer peace even during a battle, let alone innocent civilians.
When ye go forth to fight in the way of Allah, be careful to discriminate, and say not unto one who offereth you peace, Thou art not a believer, seeking the chance profits of this life, so that ye may despoil him.
Therefore, while Western governments carry out terrorism and violence on civilians as a military policy, Islam's military rules of engagement undeniably protect civilians. Allah, Allah, Allah. In terms of forcing beliefs on others, many previous U.S. governments initiated unjustified military aggression to force their agendas on others, under false pretexts such as spreading democracy and national security. First, the Tonkin Gulf Resolution was passed to invade Vietnam, based on supposed attacks by North Vietnamese on U.S. ships, but the LBJ tapes showed that this incident never happened. Second, when the U.S. demanded from the government of Afghanistan,
they will hand over the terrorists, or they will share in their fate.
The Afghani ambassador's reply was reasonable. If America has proof, we are ready for the trial of Osama bin Laden in light of the evidence. Instead of sharing any evidence against bin Laden of any crime to avoid the war, this choice to invade has caused over 3 million excess Afghani deaths. Third, the U.S. invaded Iraq with falsified evidence without a trace of any nuclear program or weapons of mass destruction.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
Over 1 million violent Iraqi deaths are directly attributed to the invasion, with another 1 million non-violent excess deaths. These figures exclude the 200,000 violent Iraqi deaths from the first Gulf War and 2.6 million excess and avoidable Iraqi deaths caused by the U.S. embargo between 1990 and 2003. Fourth, since September 2000, 7,500 Palestinian homes have been completely demolished, with tens of thousands more damaged and left uninhabitable. The enclosure and isolation of Gaza has left 80% of the Palestinian population in poverty and in an unimaginable humanitarian crisis. It is the Israeli government that is forcing their religious belief of the Jewish Promised Land on Arab Muslims and Christians. This has caused 400,000 excess deaths in Palestine and southern Lebanon. Fifth, Israel's oppression of the Palestinians is with the complete financial and political support of the U.S., with $156 billion in direct aid by 2006, and another $10 billion over the next 10 years. The U.S. has also vetoed 42 UN resolutions that support Palestine. The U.S. even prevents countries from showing solidarity with the plight of the Palestinians, such as in 2006 when Condoleezza Rice warned Norway not to boycott Israeli products. The U.S. and its allies refused to accept the democratically elected Hamas government, which won by an overwhelming majority, despite the zealot U.S. government's fundamentalist claims of spreading democracy. In contrast to such political oppression, the Quran guarantees religious freedom in several verses.
There is no compulsion in religion. And if thy Lord willed, all who are in the earth would have believed together. Wouldst thou, Muhammad, compel men until they are believers? Say, it is the truth from the Lord of you all. Then whosoever will, let him believe, and whosoever will, let him disbelieve.
Furthermore, the Quran prohibits aggression against peaceful people.
Fight in the way of Allah against those who fight against you, but begin not hostilities.
As a result, Western governments exercise militancy and unjust elective wars for ulterior motives, while Islam guarantees religious freedom and prohibits starting such wars. In conclusion, Western governments carry out prejudice, terrorism, and militancy on a colossal scale, causing the death of 8 million Muslims in recent years. These atrocities are to blame for Muslims carrying anti-Western signs, praying against their oppressors, and even for the violent reaction of some misguided Muslims. The Quran clearly provides distinct rules to all humanity prohibiting oppression and violence against civilians, whether committed by individuals or governments. Allah, Allah, Allah.